You're listening to Swinburne's AI in Education podcast. This podcast is being recorded on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the lands in Hawthorn and Melbourne's east and outer east, where Swinburne's campuses are located. We acknowledge the First Peoples are the first teachers, pedagogically caring for country, kin and ancestors. My name is Rowena Ulbrick and I'm Academic Director, Digital Literacies at Swinburne University.
In this episode, we're joined by colleagues from the University of Texas at San Antonio to explore how a university can build a clear, institutional-wide approach to GenAI in learning and teaching. We'll hear from Vice Provost of Academic Innovation, Dr. Melissa Vito, alongside Dr. Claudia Arcolin, Executive Director of Learning and Teaching Experiences, and two of UT San Antonio's academic leaders, Dr. Drew Stephen and Dr. Rita Mitra. Together, they'll unpack the strategy behind UT San Antonio's work, their rationale, responsibilities as AI academic ambassadors, and the practical steps, the guardrails needed to build shared capability across faculties. We'll also reflect on why collaboration across academic staff, professional teams, and student matters when responding to the opportunities of AI, especially for student learning and success. Let's get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Let's dive right in. Melissa, what problem were you trying to solve with UT San Antonio's AI strategy for learning and teaching? And what were the key principles that were guiding your approach?
Thanks, Rowena. I'm excited to be here also, so thank you. Thanks for inviting us. I like to think of things more like what's our opportunity? I mean, clearly there are problems that underpin it. But it's the part of me that's like, wow, what's the opportunity here? So early on, I thought the opportunity with generative AI was this was back in November 22, early 23, was to just really learn and potentially change the narrative, because then it was all about students are cheating. They have a brand new tool and all they're going to do is become experts at cheating. So immediately I wanted to resist that. And so I felt like our opportunity was clearly to get in early, to think about the opportunities that exist for teaching and learning, clearly around student success, workforce development, all of those key anchors for us. But it was more about curiosity. We look at our values around curiosity, creativity, building digital literacy, some of those sort of bigger picture things. And to me, this was really key to how we would approach this. And so that was really what drove us. And I think that those guiding principles, I remember our first meeting with our peer learning network where we were just trying to figure it out. And we were like, well, what will be our values? And I'll never forget, one of the faculty members from communications said, well, how about one of them should be that AI should promote and not replace creativity. How enduring is that still now, 3 years later, and probably 3 years from now? And we talked about things like critical thinking. And so those are the opportunity to me was, how do we enhance student learning, student success? How does it re-energize teaching and make us rethink assessment? But really also, how do we change the narrative, which at that time was just kind of negative. And so those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah, and I really love that it's a values-driven approach rather than a technology solution approach. I think that's coming at it from really different places. And values, I feel like in educational institutions, they're things that we can tend to agree on. They're touchstones for us, where we can agree on that. We might have different perspectives on the technology itself, but value brings us together. And I think bringing people together around AI seems to be something that's really working within higher education institutions.
Well, I think one other thing I wanted to add, two pieces to that were really important, and they did come out in our very first early meetings, is that we needed to engage as many faculty as we could. And fortunately, there hadn't been a lot of time between the pandemic and the start of this. And so we still had a lot of really active relationships with many faculty in multiple departments on campus. And so we drew on them to just come together, and that we needed to bring our students in. And so we regularly meet with student government leadership. We work with student success literally hand in glove. In fact, we've started a fellowship program so that staff members can spend some time in each other's units to learn about what we're doing to enhance faculty development and student success. And so we anchored this in conversations with our faculty and conversations with our students, and not starting with policies, but really starting from a place of we need to learn what we're doing. And then if we need to develop some guidelines, they'll be, built with our faculty, and the same thing with our students in terms of student guidelines. So I just wanted to throw that out before I forgot.
Yeah, and really important too. And I really like that sort of, that or that cross discipline learning from each other. And I'm interested then, sort of building on that is how do you translate that strategy from that values driven approach down to the very tactical learning and teaching and the actual experience? And I know you're saying student experiences in hand in glove. So what does that look like to take strategy from that big picture into the classroom?
Yeah, I think, we're really fortunate on the podcast to have a couple of our faculty fellows who are working with generative AI who will bring this to life in a way more meaningful way than I can, and Claudia, who also does a lot of direct work with it. But as we think about strategy, I'm always thinking about what that means for the day-to-day life of our faculty and our students. And so it isn't, so I would say acknowledging at the front end that one of the things that we wanted to do with generative AI was encourage use across multiple disciplines. I mean, one of our most active members of our peer learning network is head of our math program, who jumped in really early using odd prompts to help students develop critical thinking skills while they were learning what they were doing, which was really, if you think about it, in February of 23, pretty forward thinking. And so I think encouraging experimentation, knowing that we were going to be assessing, you'll hear from Dr. Mitra soon, and she's teaching has taught, but for a while, one of our classes where she's using generative AI in multiple different ways. And our area, as I've mentioned before, we support a team member from institutional research who's really terrific. And so we always know that whatever we're doing, we're going to try to think about a way to meaningfully measure impact. And it may be something different that we learn. It may be that we learn, oh, it helped with DFW rates, or maybe it didn't, but it definitely impacted engagement on the part of our students and different ways that students were learning. And so I may be talking a little bit around your question, but the strategy and big picture values anchor what we've done with teaching and learning and how we think about assessment. And I think that having the peer network, faculty learn from each other, which is really important. Having guidelines that are practical and not built around things that you can't do because it might be bad, but more built around here's a framework, and here are the things that we may be examples of what you might want to try. And so also framing this in a positive way that would encourage even the most risk-averse faculty to feel comfortable trying something across different disciplines. And so, if that makes sense, we always have early adopters who jump in, and then we have some who are still waiting. And then we've also done some pulse surveying to help us understand broadly where faculty and students are around, multiple different issues. I think one of the biggest learning points there is that our faculty and students tend to be more alike than people think in terms of how they're experiencing things and where they have their concerns or worries.
It's really interesting, and we're finding it really similar too, that when we're doing surveys or we're doing focus groups, we're gathering data even from research, we're finding that there is this uncanny likeness between educator and the student experience. And this is a really unique opportunity, I think, to be able to be learning together, around this. It's a bit of a leveling of the playing field. I know it won't make everyone feel comfortable, but I do think it's an exciting opportunity for students to really co-create with us. And I know you mentioned but that's really important because they are bringing in some respects, lots of expertise around the youth. They've been very motivated to use it, and actually talking to students, I'm always impressed with what they're trying and how they're using it. We can learn so much from them and what they're doing, and then looking at how can we support them.
What's interesting, when we first started the conversation, faculty were more aware of generative AI than our students were. I mean, this was back January of 23 when we were talking to students. Then students started using it when they figured out what it was, student adoption increasing, faculty kind of, moving along, but not at the same level. And now we're actually finding our students less positive about generative AI for multiple different reasons, and yet our faculty interest increasing. And so it's kind of fun to sort of watch the way that things are intersecting and shifting. And for us, it's just most important to stay engaged so that we have an idea of what makes the most impact when we are trying to promote learning or workforce skills.
Fantastic. Thank you. Interested in what do you see success looking like at UT San Antonio for the next, say, 12 to 24 months? And you were talking about impact. Like, how do you plan to evaluate that success? And what's the next major move that you're planning?
Yeah, that's the tough question because I spent a lot of my life kind of just noticing things and then thinking, that's what we need to do. And I did when I was consulting, I was at an institution and a woman gave me a book called Seeing Around Corners. And she's like, this one just reminds me of you. And so I've kind of always felt that. This one, I'm having a harder time seeing around the corner because it is such a dynamic tool right now. And so everything that I listen to makes me think, oh my God, we're behind the curve on agentic AI. What are we doing? Where are we? We were in a meeting a couple weeks ago and Dr. Mitra's like, what should we do this summer with our students? I'm like, have them build agents. We need to get into this. And so I think for me, it's a continual kind of learning process and listening, watching people outside of higher ed to see what they're doing. I still think that as educators, we have a high opportunity and almost a responsibility to provide, reskilling and upskilling for those who are working in other corporate settings and businesses. I think the expiration date on a degree is a lot shorter now. So I think if I look around the corner, I think that maybe there'll be a more seamless continuum of university to workforce to continual education. They talk about sort of pre-K to gray, which is really how you think about education. And I do think I think that is a big thing. And I think that AI may be that experience, that tool, that technology, that cultural change that provokes that across the board. So what does that mean for UTSA? Clearly, I want us to be top of the pack and out front doing things that inspire others and also continuing to measure impact. When we first thought about bringing on a institutional research team member, it was kind of unusual that we would do that in teaching, learning, digital transformation, and our other areas. But it has become our core value that whatever we're thinking about, we think about what we're learning, and then we use it to inform what we continue to do. I mean, we found out that when we do course transformations, it's amazing. Lower DFW rates, lots of good stuff. But you know what? We only do one section out of 10, and that faculty member leaves. We've impacted some students, but not as many. So we're taking a kind of a different approach to that. So it's not just collecting and measuring and reporting, but it is also thinking about what it means for what we do in our next steps around the corners. And stay tuned. I'd love to come back and have you ask me that a year from now.
Oh, we will. I mean, I'm pleased to say that, our third global community of practice event between Swinburne and UT San Antonio in September that will be around agentic AI. So I think we're going to be learning together on this, and it's certainly very important to us as well. We're doing lots of experimenting, lots of evaluation of the impact sort of things. I think one of the wonderful things around measuring the impact is that AI itself can be so helpful in understanding the data, that being able to understand, develop insights. We're able to get these so much more easily with using AI, that we can make those data informed choices so much more easily than what we perhaps previously could. Yeah. Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome, Rowena. Thanks.
Um, Claudia, I'm going to come to you now, and I'm really interested because in your role you're working a lot with educators directly and supporting them to make changes in their teaching. When you're working directly with educators, what's the most common sticking points that you're seeing when they're trying to use AI well? And what would be some of the practical sort of first steps that you found to have the biggest difference?
Thank you, Rowena, for asking these questions. So it's very important when we work with faculty to not talk just about the technology, because when we want to implement a new strategy, when we want to innovate teaching and learning, it's about confidence, it's about time, the identity of a faculty member, what they want to communicate to their students. And as Melissa shared, it's about values, passion for teaching, and curiosity. So when a new technology is introduced and generative AI has been a huge change, there's often a fear of not doing it right, especially when it comes to assessment. And faculty are asking, how do I design meaningful work? Or how do I make sure that my students are learning? So, working with the Generative AI Peer Learning Network, we created this community where faculty can share different practices, can talk about different ways of introducing artificial intelligence into their courses. And there were some important sticking points that are part of the conversation. For example, how do I use AI as a thinking partner and not just a shortcut? How do I create a safe environment for my students where they can share their concerns about artificial intelligence? How do I get started with artificial intelligence? Because it can be overwhelming. And when we're talking about faculty, we also have to consider their workload. Learning a new tool can feel like one more thing they need to add to an already full plate. So the approach that we take is redesign one assignment, one interactive lesson. Get started with that. Gather your student feedback, create a community with your students, and then make visible how artificial intelligence, in this case, is improving the learning experience. So this is some of the things that we're incorporating when working with our community of faculty and when we are creating this community, and we are nurturing curiosity and a pilot approach to introduce innovation in the teaching and learning experience.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I think, yeah, as we mentioned earlier, so much power in bringing that community together where they can actually share that experience of not knowing. It feels a safer place when you can find others that are having a similar experience, really not sure about what place is this going to have? How can I do this meaningfully? And yeah, some great first steps there, starting with, one assessment, of course, measuring impact. And I think reaching out to students is a great idea for feedback, because that's the motivator. If it's hitting the mark for them, it gives us the motivation that, yes, I'm on the right track. I should keep doing this. Ultimately, most educators, I feel, they want to have engaging lessons. They want to engage their students. That is actually increasingly becoming more difficult. There's lots of attention deficit going on, lots of technologies, that sort of stuff. So I think they're great. That's great advice for those sort of first steps. And of course, we know that there's such a breadth in our communities. Obviously, what brought us together, Claudia, about 3 years ago, was that we had started our community of practice in our institutions. No, we've had lots of conversations previously about we're helping educators take those first steps, but also we now have super users of the technology. So how do we give them a platform, give them an opportunity to share their experience as well? And those questions around, how can I do things that were not previously possible with generative AI? They're sometimes more challenging questions to respond to, But our leading educators are doing a great job of sort of forging that path. And I'm looking forward to talking to Rita and Drew more in a moment about that. But before we move on, I just wanted to sort of talk more about students and how are students experiencing and perceiving the integration of Gen AI in their learning, and how are you intentionally involving them as partners in that process?
So, generative AI is something so new, both for faculty and for students, that they can learn together. And in many conversations with our faculty, we are thinking about the new role of faculty as coaches to help their students to learn about artificial intelligence in a meaningful way and to prepare them for the workforce. At the beginning of the community of practice, we were talking about should we talk about artificial intelligence or not in our courses. And the majority of our faculty feel a responsibility to prepare our students for the workforce. It's important that once they graduate, they know how to use artificial intelligence and they know how they will be more competitive in the job market if they know how to combine artificial intelligence with the different skills they're learning in college. So, as Vanessa shared, we were very intentional in partnering with the Student Government Association. We also have an inaugural role of a student AI ambassador in our division of academic innovation. And this student, is helping us to bridge communication opportunities among faculty and students. He's doing an amazing job with gathering students and collecting their feedback. We also have several focus groups with students. Next week, we will have a focus group with students in the College of Engineering because we want to talk about artificial intelligence in the engineering professions. And we have another internship, the Student AI Partners. We are now at the 5th cohort. Through this internship, students are partnering with faculty, staff, other students, and in the future, they will partner with industry partners. And they're exploring artificial intelligence, earning a micro-credential on artificial intelligence, but also learning about leadership, communication, so that they will be prepared for the workforce. The good thing of this internship is that they work on a specific project. For example, in previous cohorts, they have created a chatbot for our housing department to provide different information to students interested in knowing more about housing at UT San Antonio. And we celebrate the internship with a showcase where they can share what they've learned, their skills with a broader audience. And so we create opportunities for them to network and to really showcase how they can use artificial intelligence.
That's an incredible opportunity for students at UT San Antonio, because it's not only just giving them that experience of being able to have learn AI, but applying it in real world contexts that have tangible benefits and outcomes that can make a difference. And what a wonderful value exchange that is, because you're investing in them, but they're investing their ideas back into the university where those solutions are being used. And actually that can obviously benefit the whole institution as well. I love that idea. I think it's fantastic. I'm interested in your student that you've employed in that role of being able to be an ambassador, if you like, of AI. We've got a very similar program, as you know, with a student AI lead, and it's been really interesting working with them because they do have different perspectives. They also can have different conversations with students. I'm interested, what have you learned through that partnership from students about how AI is impacting their learning experience, and how are you using that feedback to inform what you're doing next?
Well, the first conversation we had was about artificial intelligence and academic integrity because many faculty fear that with artificial intelligence, students are going to cheat. The first thing that this student AI ambassador shared was, well, I can already tell you what are the courses where students are cheating and why. It is not because artificial intelligence, it's because the assessments are not relevant. And it's just easier to complete it with artificial intelligence because they're considered busy work. They do not see the relevance, the connection with real world experience. They do not see the value of working and learning these different concepts and knowledge. Instead, what is really important is for the students to be able to share their experience, and also they're asking to be transparent and to create trust. And this is another hot topic when talking about artificial intelligence, is that sometimes faculty do not allow the use of artificial intelligence in their courses, but they're using artificial intelligence to create content or to grade. So something that we encourage our faculty to do is to show how they're using artificial intelligence. Faculty are a model for our students on how to use it in a correct way, in a meaningful way, for deeper thinking. And we have the guidelines for faculty, written by faculty for faculty, and guidelines written by students for students. But also we have different syllabus statements where faculty need to be clear about the expectations on using artificial intelligence. And they need to provide these expectations and discuss these expectations with the students. Something else that the Student AI ambassadors shared is that it's important to include students into the conversation. So, for example, when a faculty member is creating the expectations for the course or the rubric on using artificial intelligence for an assignment, build this rubric together with the students. Understand how we incorporate student voice into the assignment, into the learning experience. Another thing is to create space for students to reflect, to share their concerns or expectations toward artificial intelligence, to talk about how artificial intelligence is improving their learning. And at the end is always this human AI collaboration. We can talk about technology, but the human factor is always the first element, is always the condition that we need to make sure it's in our courses and in our teaching practices. And then being explicit about the why and the how artificial intelligence fits into the learning experience and provide a scope for this.
I think, when you're talking about these fantastic strategies, what springs to mind is that this is about knowing your students and having a relationship with them, which has always been important. Actually, co-constructing what success looks like before AI, really, fantastic approach to use to sort of build agency and ensure that they actually sort of have that shared understanding about what they're doing. Having clear expectations, them sharing what their expectations are. These are about, knowing your students and having an openness to co-construct the learning experience with them. And so you throw AI into it and it becomes really important that you know your students and have the connection. AI should not be something that is separating us, that we're all just sitting on our computers on our own. This is, it should be used in a way to build those connections. Of course, what was interesting to me is when you said when there maybe isn't that connection or that engagement from students, then, they immediately know, and they may use AI in inappropriate ways or, that may breach academic integrity because they don't see the meaning and the purpose in it. So to me, it does speak to the strategies you're talking about. They are really about great learning and teaching, and coming back to those principles is so important. Thank you, Claudia. I'd love to come to both Rita and Drew now. You're obviously both early adopters in the use of AI. We've been working with you through our global community of practice for years. But I'm really interested in, could you share one specific example of how you've used AI in your teaching and learning, and what was the impact that you noticed on students?
Sure. Just to also top off on what you were talking about, how AI has kind of surfaced some of the issues we had prior to AI even coming onto the scene. These are issues with student engagement and student competencies that we had before AI come to. And in fact, I consider if you want to sort of reframe the issue of AI, it's an opportunity to really, because we must address the issues. It gives us an opportunity to address them head on. So one thing I do in my classes is to intentionally make the assignment more difficult and then allow them to use AI. So really ramp up the difficulty in a way that I would not have been able to do without AI, because it would have been too vague an assignment and they wouldn't have been able to had enough time to research. So an example of that is last week I had an operating system security assignment in which students deployed a cloud honeypot. And without getting too technical, a honeypot is a way to attract internet bots. So previously, I had to give exact instructions, and sometimes they wouldn't work because software versions very quickly. And even from the time I tested it for a particular semester, something would have changed, a dependency would have changed. And so then we'd go into the semester sort of not sure of how to handle the issue. But now with AI, that's part of the learning process, something they have to do at work. There's no one to actually explain the problem to them. They are the innovators in determining the solution when a software versions. And so when they can use AI and brainstorm with AI and each other, they actually bring the lab to a higher place that I can then integrate into the next semester. They're also required to post a tip that they've learned when they were working with AI on our messaging space. And I grab all those tips and incorporate them into the next semester and attribute them as partial authors. So that's just one way that's been very effective and has helped me a lot with my own curricular development.
I love that example, Rita, because I think it's that leveling up that we're talking about, which is it's not just this replacement, but actually, what we were discussing earlier, you would not be able to do this previously. So it's enhancing the thinking and the learning. How important do you think in that example the authentic problem solving is in posing these challenging questions? Do you think that level of authenticity, that that real world problem solving element, is that something that is important to you when you're looking at increasing the challenge?
Yes, absolutely. As to, what Claudia was saying, I'm actually so interested in what Claudia shared. I had not known that about the student ambassador, but it is true that students are much more engaged when they see the relevance of a problem to what they're going to be doing in the workplace. So we all try to incorporate problems that are used in the workplace, but it's hard to incorporate that into one semester, and to solve the problem in one semester without that assistance. And so now we have that assistance from AI. Also, AI can look historically at problems that have been solved in a certain way. So it consolidates all that information. It also can now look at current solutions and sort of create some novel new ways of looking at how to solve. That has happened to me countless times, and it's also happened to the students, something we didn't find in a manual or in one document, but combining all that information together came up with more novel solutions.
Yeah, amazing. And, that just shows how far the technology's come as well. As where we were 3 years ago, that's very different. What the possibilities are now, looking at novel solutions that go up and beyond what would potentially be in the course curricula.
That's right. We couldn't, even that one lab has progressed much further this year than 2 years ago because of the better AI tools that we have.
And then are you seeing a difference in the educational outcomes for students, having taught that unit for year on year? Are you seeing changes in the outcomes for students with using GenAI?
Right. I think they feel more confident in their ability to problem solve. And that's, problem solve difficult problems. So they feel more confident that they themselves, with help with their peers, because I also allow them to work with their peers, to solve a problem and then document it, explain it. That's another thing. AI can help them explain what they solved, even if they're not sure how did that really work. They can explain it, and they're required to document their process. And then they can go into their interviews and have this documentation, this portfolio of what they've done that's a more difficult problem, and they enjoy it. So, and they feel like they belong. So some of those intangible characteristics of being able to demonstrate your competencies are where I've seen the biggest changes.
And do you see, Rita, that, this has really built their confidence in like a problem-solving methodology, if you like, how to, undertake that process? Do you see that there's, further along in the course, you might take away the AI to see, whether or not that learning is secured, is that, that they have actually learned how to do that on their own?
That's a really good question. I do ask them to, nowadays people have recommended that we use AI to brainstorm ideas. So I don't do that. I ask them to brainstorm their own ideas. And I also have started asking them to start their writing from scratch, because it's so much harder for us to sit and just think of what's going on inside our minds. What do we put in our minds? And then ask the AI, what does this look like? Did I meet the rubric, or did I cover everything? That's the harder thing that I'm just leaning more into having them start things from a blank slate.
And there's like, that they're still connected, engaged in what the process is, and then using AI. Well, was there any gaps? Was there any other contrasting views? Was it similar, different? That sort of analysis is useful, almost as if you would do in a group setting anyway, a collaborative setting where you might start individually and then open it up to the group.
There's also some introspection. Like we're so used to needing to be productive now with AI, even for us as employees. There's a sort of a mandate to be more productive. And so I think it's useful for students to have to sit there, not be productive necessarily, but to get inside their own minds and really express what they think. So that's kind of what I'm leaning now, rather than, asking them after they finish a project then to do it on their own. I'm asking them to start on their own.
Thank you for sharing that reflection. Drew, I'd love to come to you now. Obviously, a very different discipline context. Please tell us, what's something that you've tried in the classroom and the impact that you saw on students.
Sure. And I'll start by saying, Rita, I'm glad you shared that, because the brainstorming and the starting from scratch are things that I never find AI does well. That I think I need to start, and then when I get a little bit further, that's when the value. And it's kind of interesting. That's what I've been trying to do with my students. So yes, as somebody teaching music history, I think there's a much less obvious entry point into AI. Yet I think my students, as either educators or marketing or performers or composers, they're going to be confronted with this. And so what I've been experimenting this semester is really moving from having them ask questions to having them direct outputs, so that they're using AI to create something. And it took me, I think, a long time to come up with something, but my big new assignment that I've put in, and I'm able to do much more, because with AI, I can have the students go through so much material, in this case, much faster. But I'm trying this in an upper level survey course, but also a graduate research course. I'm kind of doing the parallel thing, that I wanted them to explore historical debates, like music history debates. So absolute music and program music. Does music tell a story, or does music just exist on its own? And then I had them working in teams to do this. And so they were starting with AI in steps to have it identify what is the context, what are the two sides of this debate, and then to move to, well, if there is going to be a debate, who would be the historical figures that would participate in this debate, and where would it take place? And then to direct AI to create a debate script, which ultimately they performed, but then with stages along the way of having them really stop and evaluate it and check it for accuracy, check it for bias, check it for relevance. The interesting, I was in the room with my undergraduate class, so it was really interesting when they got to that step of deciding who would participate in the debate. That was the weakest part of AI because it was going with the most obvious answers. In fact, I had, I think, 6 different debate topics, and it almost always had the same 6 composers. So this was their chance to say, well, what about a woman's perspective? Or what about this lesser known person? And then really to see how that changed the debate. And then what was really nice with it was that they then also performed it. And so I got 6 really good 6-minute debates. And I was thinking this would have taken me weeks without AI for them to research this and come up with the scripts and everything. And it was nice that once they got to that point where they really took control and made it their own. So my graduates less so. My undergraduates, oddly, they took their 19th century music debates, and these are real debates, but they placed them as a Twitter argument, as a frat party debate, as a Love Island episode. So and that was I mean, on the one hand, it was like something I didn't anticipate, but it was so interesting how they took this very creatively and put their own mark on it. And in terms of outcomes, I think they really, I think it was hard because they were going through a lot of material so fast, but I think they really got to a sense of these people and their role in it. And it's not just something that we're talking about, but these were real issues that they were encountering. So it was a wonderful experiment, and I'm looking forward to moving forward with it and see how I can refine it.
I think, when you were talking about just the steps in that project, how carefully you scaffolded the use of AI. And so at each stage, you're not just simply giving the outcome and then saying you can use AI. You're at each stage, you're saying, this is how I'd like you to use it. So the process is obviously they're developing these AI literacy skills along the way, alongside that discipline knowledge about music history and doing things that perhaps you wouldn't have had time to do, like change the context or, change the personas. AI is just so good for this. This wouldn't have been possible previously. So that's where you see that expanding of the thinking on top of, what would have been possible.
And actually, one of the stages was near the very end. It was once they had everything set in the script, it was to come up with a distinguishing gesture or prop or something for each of the debate people, so that they would get us. And so it would be this person sits very still and tends not to move, or this person gestures had brought his violin bow with him and gestures emphatically. And so it was nice to see how they realized that in the performance too, because I think also it gives them and in most cases, it was a historically accurate depiction, but it gives them a sense of who these people are. And I think having done this type of thing the old-fashioned, old school way, it takes so much time to delve into that and to get that depth.
Yeah, fantastic. Just a question for both of you. You've just recently taken up the AI academic ambassador roles. I'm really interested in knowing a little bit more about the role. What impact do you think it will have on the university strategy and AI uptake over the next, say, 2 years?
Well, we're so thrilled, I think, both of us, to work with each other. I've known Drew before, and I'm really enjoying brainstorming with him, and also to work under Dr. Vito. It's her brainchild, and we're just, along for the ride, and she's provided some great framing for us. We meet every once in a while, and she always has more new ideas for us to work with. So we're just enjoying the process and coming up with different initiatives that help faculty and students, but our focus is really on helping faculty feel more comfortable integrating AI also in the way that they feel comfortable, not pressuring them in any particular way, but getting inside their course and seeing how we can help them become more comfortable. And also being a kind of first pilot in experimenting different approaches so that we can do it, see how it goes, maybe troubleshoot along the way, and then they have someone to lean on. Drew, would you like to add your talk?
certainly that, especially for me, I mean, the interesting thing is that we're not siloed. We're sharing things across disciplines in a really special way. And I mean, every time we interact, I'm frantically taking notes because I'm learning so much. But I think also for both of us, one of the things that we're very much aware of is among faculty, there's a lot of faculty see the value, but there's so much uncertainty. And I encountered with my colleagues people who are using it and doing great work with it, but they say, but I don't know how I should be using this, or I don't know if this is right. And so it's really, and I think to add on to that, I think in music, as one of the creative arts, there's a degree of stigma attached to AI. And I think it's hard for faculty to get the confidence to really use that. And so I think it's providing models or working with them to find the ways that they can feel comfortable knowing that this is the way forward, and start incorporating it into their work in different ways. And it's the same with students. And again, being models for the students is so important because I know after I did my the AI activity with the students, there are very vocal students who are anti-AI in a lot of ways, and those tend to be the ones that make themselves best heard in the class, in respectful ways and in very valid ways. But it's the other ones who will say, I've been using this, but I didn't feel comfortable talking about it, and I really appreciate that you're giving us a forum to be able to use this and experiment, and they're not concerned about the repercussions or punishment, especially.
Yeah, I also think that transparency around the discussion about how to use AI is important. Bringing in students who are hesitant to use it because of valid reasons is also important, because we need to know when not to use it, or the guardrails we need to put on it, or the sustainability concerns that we need to address. So those students are just as important, bringing in that diversity of thought. So I love that we can create those open spaces, kind of listening sessions for faculty and students.
It's really powerful. And, we're certainly seeing the same at Swinburne that there certainly is a core group of students who, for their own reasons, whether it be trust or ethics, sustainability is another one that we're hearing. These are all, as you said, Drew, these are very valid concerns, and we want students to be able to make their own choices. But the most important thing is that we're sharing the conversation. We can't just, put it in a box and pretend it's not there. How can we have those open dialogues from students, understand their concerns, be able to meet them, and on their level. I think these are really important. The fact that you've been able to create that environment is really powerful.
If I could add one more thing, I found it really interesting. And Rita and I had a conversation about this about a month ago. But recently, there's so many articles on AI is undermining thinking, or it's undermining critical thinking, or it's all of these things. And actually, I shared that with my class. All of these articles. And I said, the thing though that all of them have in common is they're talking about a certain type of AI use, that this very superficial type of AI use, where you're asking questions but you're not engaging it. And at the same time, there's a workplace study talking about like the 5% of high-level AI users, and how that was really pushing creativity and pushing critical thinking, and just giving them that model as well. So it's, yes, if you're using it this way, it's definitely not going to help you. But if you're using it in these ways, and I think that also comes back to what Claudia was saying about the student perspectives of it, is that I think they hear a lot of these things, and it's really knowing. And so I'm trying to be really clear in my assignments as well, that these are places where I really need you to start from the beginning, where you doing this work, brainstorming, coming up with ideas, doing the initial drafts is how you learn this. At this point, this is when you can start using AI as a learning partner and move forward with it. And so I think those are the discussions that have been really fruitful for us.
Well, I think this is a lovely place to finish. I would like to thank all of you for joining in the conversation today. It's fantastic to hear what's happening at UT San Antonio. Really exciting stuff. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks, Rowena.
Thanks, Rowena.